Welcome to Interior Analysis. I'm Evan Westman,
I'm Jelani T. Kelly.
And I'm Angel Michele.
and today we're talking about Interstellar, dipping our toes back into Nolan for the first time in a couple of years. And we're finally talking about ones that, I like all of Nolan except Insomnia, but this is like the bottom of my love these movies tier, Nolan. I think this is 5 out of whatever he's got now, 11. It's number 5, but I still
Yeah.
really love it.
Dark Knight Rises at the top.
Dark Knight Rises, I think, is just below this, which I know a lot of people would disagree with, but Bane. So, Angel, you'd seen this before, right?
Yeah, I feel like I saw it around when it came out, but I can't really remember. It's definitely been a while, though. Like, I haven't seen it in at least a couple of years. But, I don't know, it was good getting back to it. It's longer than I remember, but it makes sense given the amount of stuff in it. Like, there's just so much going on, and there's a lot of world building that's done, like, very efficiently. So, I dug coming back to it. It was fun.
We don't normally do this, but what is this out of 10 for you? I feel like for this one, I weirdly just want to go around and get scores out of 10.
You know why you're doing it.
I know
It's
I'm
a
doing.
Nolan movie. You know why you're doing it.
I don't know. I would say it kind of depends on like if I'm more on a hard sci-fi kick or if I'm more on like a general sci-fi kick. Like as far as hard sci-fi, this is definitely like 8 to 9 just because there's so much attention to detail. On like regular sci-fi, maybe like a 7 because there's parts of it that do get a little jumbled for me and sometimes it can feel a little more exposition-y than I like, but I guess if I had to put like a number on it, I'd say like solid 7.5 to 8-ish.
Okay. And Jelani, you had not seen this before.
Nope.
Initial thoughts and initial rating.
I like to approach ratings sometimes where you're not allowed to choose 7 out of 10 because I feel like 7's just like the middle, even though it's not. I'd give this an 8
Nice.
if I couldn't choose 7, but I wouldn't choose 7. So anyway,
So it's an 8.
yeah, it's an 8. First time seeing it, I enjoyed it. It almost got me at a couple of parts. It made me tear up.
I'm really happy you enjoyed this because, like I said, this is the first like Nolan movie that I really like, and I feel like it's pretty rare that I bring something that you end up really liking. I don't think that's happened very often. The reverse tends to be more frequent, I think. Well, the reverse being, I guess both reverses. Like either you bring something that I end up being like, oh, that's actually better than I thought it would be, or me bring something you're like, that sucks. So
what have you
boring,
done?
or whatever. Um,
You wasted my time.
Dunkirk has entered the
Oh,
chat,
God.
but
That I feel
We're
like
actually
that's
talking
like
about this dude. I fully agree with you on Dunkirk, Jelani. I was like, I saw it, I'm like, meh.
that is I feel like that's rarer though, where I'm just like, what was this?
yeah, it's not usually hatred, but like it's. I feel like it's rare that you like really enjoy my picks. I'm happy you enjoyed it, and we'll get into it. This was in my top 10 when I first saw it. So it came out 2014, and that was like when I was just getting into criticism and like becoming a Nolan fan. But I wasn't anticipating it, so I saw it like the year after, and it landed immediately in my top 10. It's still probably top 30, but it dropped off in the intervening years. This time I saw it in IMAX because they re-released it for the 10th anniversary, and holy crap, is this good in IMAX. I moved it up from an 8 back to a 9 out of 10. I think it's going to stay there. It works really well. I think just like I had remembered this more for like, I don't want to call them plot holes, but like there's a couple of stretches
The
in
black
this.
holes.
Black holes, and I remembered it more for like those, and this time I just saw more of the good in it that I had forgotten about. It's a lot better than I would have hyped it up to be 2 months ago before this rewatch. I also just love that I'm gonna just Nolan geek out a little bit here, but part of why I love Nolan is that you can criticize some of the stuff in this movie and his other ones for being a little bit dense or like too difficult to understand first time, or just like, why is he not letting us hear the dialogue? Why is he insistent on not using CGI? At the same time, not many directors get this budget to make something original, and I love that he takes advantage of that to make some really interesting stuff that nobody else could make. As opposed to, I am going to call him out, like, I really hate that James Cameron uses that power to make 5 Avatar movies. Because he could be making stuff like this, and he's chosen not to. And I find that frustrating because, like, so many directors could do something great with that permission, I guess, that he's been given, and are probably never going to get it. So I love it when, like, I wish there were more people in Nolan's position. So I'm always excited when a director, like, I think Greta Gerwig and Denis Villeneuve are 2 directors that are maybe approaching that point right now, where they've had enough hits that maybe they can start getting blank checks to make stuff that's original. And I would love to see it. A couple other quick beginning notes. I've kind of had this in my head the past few months. This is just kind of random because I'm in a D&D campaign right now that we started in a pocket dimension where time moved slower. And I immediately thought of the water planet scene in this movie, and we were stuck there for several sessions. We recently got out. When we started, I said to my DM, I was like, "Are you pulling an Interstellar on us?" In that case, it's not as severe. I think it was like 1 day equals 1 month. But I wanted to be out of there the entire time because I don't like, even in fictional settings, having my time wasted like that. One final note. I just noticed this time, I think it's kind of funny that there's like a 20-minute stretch in the middle of the movie where every 5 minutes it introduces a new big actor. It's like, oh, Casey Affleck. Oh, Jessica Chastain. Oh, Topher Grace. Oh, Matt Damon.
Was Casey Affleck the older Tom?
Yes.
Yep. Yeah, older Tom. They do that all the time. They got Wes Bentley too. Like, out of nowhere, they'll just bring in like a new big actor and act like it's no big deal. But not in the same way that like Oppenheimer did it, where they fade into the background. It's like, no, this guy has lines. He's delivering all the sci-fi talk and everything. Like, and then sometimes they're just gone. Who knows?
Well, I feel like everyone talks about Matt Damon being, because like nobody knew Matt Damon was going to be in this, and like I feel like the other ones, like Topher Grace, you don't put on your poster. You put Matt Damon on your poster if he's in the thing.
Matt Damon was the biggest surprise. Topher Grace was definitely also a surprise when I saw it, because then I'm like, wait, is that Foreman? What's going on? Is that Eddie Brock?
Edward Brock Jr.?
Edward Brock Jr.?
Raimi mentioned.
That was the one I was talking about before. So he went
to work for Secret NASA after Spider-Man-ing didn't work out.
Oh, gosh. Name's Brock, sir. Edward Brock Jr. Yeah.
He got religion.
I mean, yeah, it didn't feel like he played, no shade to him or anything, but it didn't feel like an extremely different character from Eddie. He wasn't sleazy. I think that
well,
was
no, but that's the thing is, like, his character in this didn't have a lot.
Yeah.
Like, he's almost like a stock NPC background, and that's not his fault. It felt like he was in there to be the romantic interest for her later, but it doesn't
Which I didn't
matter,
even pick up on.
No, there was none of that anywhere ever, and then she just kisses him, and then I guess they had kids? I don't know.
I don't even know that there's any confirmation that they are his kids.
Yeah, no, there's not. I think we're just meant to assume it. It's very weird.
So did we need it at all?
I mean, he just could have been played by anyone. He happens to be played by a guy that...
I'm saying that, like, her kissing him. Like, what did that
Well, no, we didn't. He didn't need to be a romantic interest is the point.
Yeah.
Like, he could have just been a character. And it would have been... He could have been played by anybody, done anything. Like, having someone for her to explain stuff to is fine.
I think we've probably already talked about his character more than anyone ever has. Because he's so unimportant. If we're good to get into the topics, Angel, I wanted to start with yours.
Yeah, so my topic is, does the very grounded filmmaking, the very grounded nature and presentation of this movie kind of clash with the more out there, high concept sci-fi premise? Because I had really forgotten just how much, like, really out there stuff was in this movie because I hadn't seen it in a while. The whole setup at the beginning is that there's like a quote unquote ghost in their house, and there are coordinates sprayed into the dust, and they follow it to NASA, and then that's how like they find stuff which like all kind of lines up at the end because of time travel and stuff, but it feels in the moment a little convoluted and kind of pulled me out of it for a second until I remembered how everything like fit together. But I don't know, like I was interested to hear what you guys thought because the way this movie is presented, it's very hard sci-fi. It feels in a lot of ways like The Martian, even before Matt Damon shows up, where they're very forward with explaining how the science works, kind of making everything make sense from that standpoint. There's even a book that I meant to read before this that I didn't get to, called The Science of Interstellar, where they kind of go into how a lot of the science in this movie I think is actually pretty accurate to help you like understand the concepts and like that they're using like real scientific theories to sort of explore like this is how humanity would approach the situation. The way that it was presented here in some ways made it so that the movie could happen. It wasn't like they were looking for a solution or like, you know, they received a radio signal or something. It was literally like magic dust. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that, if that was anything that like you guys noticed or that bugged you this time.
I think it works. The Tesseract scene at the end, where he's inside the black hole, probably is Nolan's least grounded visuals in any movie outside of maybe the hallucinations in Batman Begins.
And least grounded fact. I'm pretty sure you get ripped apart before you get to even look closely inside of a black hole. Like, the ship would have been torn apart. It's gravity. It's gonna tear you apart before you even get to think about what the inside of the black hole look like. So
yeah, as far as we know, I think that's a much more likely theory. So in that case, it makes sense, I think, to have that be more, you know, obvious visual effects. But
I don't think it's a theory. Black holes like consume. They swallow planets and stuff. Like,
yeah, well, actually, I think the whole concept of an event horizon is you can't actually perceive anything beyond that, which is why it's like the event horizon. So technically, it's that like we don't know what actually goes on inside of a black hole. The likely scenario, given that black holes are basically big balls of like gravitational pull, is that you're going to get torn apart and like spaghettified. I'm pretty sure like it's to the point where like light can't even enter it. So like if you were to see something get sucked into a black hole, it would look like it froze in like midair basically because you can't actually see anything that's happening within that. And plenty of sci-fi stuff has done that where they've like played around with it. Like the Orville did something really funny and weird where to escape some aliens, I think they flew around the event horizon of a black hole and like time moved really fast outside of it, so they saw all these invading ships like passing, like coming and going, and then they came out and it had been like a week or something like that, and for them it had only been a few seconds, which is kind of what they do with this one on this water planet. That one was definitely way more ridiculous because like they just kind of casually flew into a black hole. In this case, I guess you could say like there was a little bit of setup as far as like, well, there's also like aliens from the future or something, or not aliens, they're us, maybe.
theoretically.
Theoretically.
how did the Orville people get out of the black hole?
They flew back out.
That's
They flew in and then they flew out. I'm not even kidding you.
Science.
Listen, I'm not an
There's a
astronaut.
whole episode, not even surrounding this particular thing, but surrounding time travel, and I think it happens in that one.
Listen, I'm not an astronaut. I
I'm
don't
not
even
either.
I've never seen a NASA, but
But that's what I'm saying, though. The thing about the Orville is that it's a fun Star Trek-esque sci-fi show, and there's some comedy in it, so I could see why in that tonally it works.
yeah,
In this, it feels a little stranger because this is presented a lot more as like, well, a lot of this science is very accurate. These are like real spaceships. They're really going through a wormhole. And like even the more out there stuff like the idea of like relativity where they lose 20 years after being on a planet for 2 hours. Like, that's kind of weird, but there's scientific theories that they explain that actually provide us with a basis to understand, okay, I don't know how that could be possible, but that does seem to be how it works. And I will say too, as far as like Nolan exposition goes, this has some of the cleanest that I have found. Like, as much as there's a lot of like big sci-fi elements or like just scientific elements that they have to explain, it never feels inorganic in the way that they're explaining it. Like,
And
never...
he did it. He did it without like a character not knowing what's going on too.
Exactly. Yeah, they're all just talking about like this is how the mission's going to proceed and like planning stuff out, as opposed to just having a character like that could have very well been Topher Grace's character and what he played, or they could have just had him be like, let's say like Murph's boyfriend, and she's explaining to him like, oh, this is how relativity works
in
or
English.
This
Damn
is
it!
How exactly. They also avoided doing that in a movie like Arrival, where Arrival.
Wait, don't
like,
spoil
all
that.
Of them
Don't spoil Arrival.
Well,
oh, okay.
This is slightly off topic, but just because it came up today, Taylor was listening to our trailers episode, and he wanted to call you out for having not seen it, Jelani. I told him I'm working on it. I told him we're going to get to it, but he says that that is a crime. I'm just passing that on.
My fault, Taylor.
He's not wrong. He's not wrong.
It is really good.
Okay.
We'll do it someday.
Yeah. This doesn't spoil Arrival, but a lot of the characters are within the same level of knowledge about what's going on. So it never feels like they're explaining to a character that is completely new to this and doesn't know anything, this is exactly how we have to do it. There are people that are specific experts in specific parts of what they're talking about. And this does a lot of that too, where like Cooper has an understanding of all of these sci-fi elements, but he's not like completely ignorant of like how all of this science works. He knows a lot of this stuff. They're just like, well, this is our plan, essentially. So I think it works really, really well here in a way where this could have easily been his most like in English damn it movie, and it wasn't, and I really appreciate that.
I think people like to call out Nolan for his like clunkier exposition. I feel like I said this in maybe the Snowpiercer episode, but he has some well hidden exposition that is harder to see, and I'm glad you called it out because I think this could have been a crazy dense exposition movie, and there are some points where you do just have to explain some stuff, like when they are planning out which planet to go to. They have a lot of science talk about like, okay, time is a resource, we got to get close to Gargantua but not too close, go in down and save some fuel. There's a lot of exposition happening there, but it's all couched in a decision and a form of conflict. That's a very common technique I've heard people say is, if you're going to have exposition, disguise it in conflict. That's kind of a way you can get away with having characters say things they already know. It's a little outside of your topic, but I think it is a good quality that this movie features.
I think the exposition could have been made better if a character said so this journey we're going to take is going to be interstellar.
Interstellar.
I would love to see that. See, that's what Topher Grace could have done. He absolutely could have been the one to say that, and then there would have been a reason for his character to be there.
Murph,
you're telling me this journey that your father took was interstellar?
Anyway,
fantastic.
That's actually a good scene and a good example of like the parts where I think the sci-fi and the more out there stuff, like, they blend together really well because you're seeing it through that lens of like character discussion, right? So there's a lot of like weird stuff happening, but they all have the same knowledge. They're all enough on the same page, and they're presenting it as like, it's not like they're like explaining like something they should already know. They're saying like, this is a problem. How do we fix this? And someone's like, okay, well, what if we do this? They're presenting it as a solution. But then that also leads into the idea of like Wes Bentley's character, whose name I can't remember.
I think it's Doyle. I always forget which one's Doyle and which one's Romley, but I think he's Doyle.
Yeah, he's Doyle.
Yeah? It doesn't matter, because that's basically his last scene. Anyway.
Doyle, more like Deadle. More like dial. That was better. Damn it.
Yeah, that's a little better.
You saved it. You did. You did. It also brings it back to the sort of like emotional crux of the movie. Like, you can't just think about your kids or your family. You have to think big picture, basically. And that's a really well done part of it. And I think that's where they bring it back to that grounded element and sort of distract us from the fact that, like, it is kind of crazy that the thing that led them here was aliens from the future. To me, it just felt strange that I kept forgetting about that part of it, like, even right after it happened, until we get to scenes like, the hand reaching out while they're going through the wormhole, or the Tesseract scene, or something like that. And moments like that, too, also kind of lead to some of the very little bits of clunkier exposition. Like in the Tesseract, where they explain, like, in 2 lines exactly what's going on, as opposed to kind of, like, letting it flow out of the characters organically.
I didn't ever get the feeling that we were actually gonna see like aliens for whatever reason. Like I said, either he's not gonna show them or it's something I'm not expecting.
Yeah, and I think it's, like, the more realistic nature of the way the film's presented is, like, they never make you feel like, well, aliens are just gonna pop out of nowhere, or at least, like, the promise of the premise is not gonna be, oh, well, wait till you see what these aliens look like. Like, this isn't an invasion movie, and we're not, like, going to their planet. They're just, like, the key to us finding another place, but it's pretty clear from the get-go that, like, these are gonna be empty planets that we have to, like, figure it out.
That's another point I had for this. I'm glad we didn't see any other life forms on the planets, because I think that would have made the movie feel like every other space sci-fi movie if they added that added element of, okay, now we have aliens, now we see them, how do we deal with them? Plus, I think that would have needed to be set up sooner and stronger than what we got. Like, imagine we're on the snow planet and we just see like a 6-legged hairless creature, or something weird. It's just like, well, didn't expect to see that in this movie. Yeah, that would have changed the tone, I think.
I think it does help. It also, like, is kind of part of the conflict of the movie is they're looking for planets that can inhabit life. And they are sort of skeptical about all three. They're like, okay, there's water here at least. There's kind of breathable air. And they say there's no life. So if you did have aliens living there, it kind of prevents that question. Granted, maybe, like, you could throw in something that's like they're not carbon-based, they don't need oxygen like we do. But I agree. I think it's good that the movie doesn't go there, mostly because it's been seen before. And this gets to be a little unique. And I think it ties into what you're asking here about the visuals, Angel. Like, even, like, something that's a lot more standard in a sci-fi movie. Like, nobody looks at a hologram in this movie. Everything looks like the way spaceships pretty much look in
everything's on a screen. There's a lot of touch screens, but everything's on a screen. Like,
the only thing that's high sci-fi, I think, is the machines. Kip, Case, TARS.
And even then, they're very, like, tangible. It's not like you're looking at, like, something like C-3PO, where they're kind of humanoid, but, like, you can tell that parts that had to be done with CGI, like, no, like, it looks somewhat practical the way that they designed them.
Yeah, and I think you couldn't get away with it as easily here. Like, in something that is more science fantasy, like Star Wars or Avatar, or anything with an alien in it, we're introducing an element that is, if you want to say, like, there's hard sci-fi, that's hard science fantasy. That is, like, solidly fictional. We are clearly making this thing up. So then you could get away with, like, a fully CG character. It might not look as good, but, like, it's not going to break the world for us in the way that I think it would here. If we had visuals that were less grounded, I think that detracts, because the line here is supposed to be a little bit blurrier between what is science and what is fiction, versus most things that have an alien in it. The line is a little more obvious, or it's at least not trying to... The suspension of disbelief is a little bit different in that kind of a story. And because there was so much work put into the science, I feel like bad visuals would have kind of undercut that. Or not even bad visuals, just like less realistic looking visuals. Like all of the planets are shot on location.
They went to a different planet for the...
On alien planets, exactly, yes. That's what happened.
I believe it.
They made real spaceships. They actually made Matt Damon go to another planet for 10 years by himself.
That was a real wormhole.
I thought he did that for The Martian already. Oh.
No, he did that for this, and then they're like, can you use this in your performance in The Martian? He said, yeah, of course.
Okay. Because Nolan doesn't really do... How much of this movie was CGI?
I deliberately tried not to find out because I like not knowing. I imagine there's a decent amount, but it is pretty tough to tell outside of the Tesseract scene.
I bet you only Timothy Chalamet was CGI. That's it. Everything else was real.
You got an actual black hole and somehow shot near it and inside of it, even though light doesn't escape the... Yeah, no, I believe it.
They spent all their CGI money on those rows and rows and rows of corn.
Or Oprah.
It.
And that was the beginning of the movie, and they're like, shit, we don't have any more money, we have to go to a real black hole, which is somehow cheaper.
On location. It's the old-fashioned way. To short answer your question, I think it is good that the visuals are more grounded.
What sea or body of water played the water planet? Because that water looks terrifyingly just dark.
I don't know how they did that, actually, because it's interesting that the whole thing was like knee deep or whatever it was, or like waist deep. I don't remember now.
It wasn't even that. It was like ankle deep.
They also, you know what's weird? They didn't react to it very much. Like
the fact that they were standing in the middle of the
Yeah, like they didn't think that it was weird or anything, and it's not like it was explained before that. Like if there had been like a one-off line before that, I would get it.
I thought they were near a shore at first.
Because they didn't even know it was going to be water. Because Doyle says something about, like, it's just water down there. And they deliberately land it like a plane on the Hudson, basically. To just, like, get it there. But then, like, they actually get down, and they stand in it, and they're just walking around. I guess they don't have time to waste time.
Well, they're also following Miller's signal. There's a spot that they're going to without having to, know for sure.
Still, like, they didn't even, like, check the water to make sure they could stand in it.
Yeah, exactly. They just kind of jumped into it.
That's fair.
It felt odd, and I'd forgotten that they don't react to it at all.
Yeah,
You know?
I thought the ship was, like, floating on it, like a plane or whatever. I thought it was just sitting on the water. And they get out, and they're just walking on it. I'm like, okay, they gotta be near a shore or something, right? Nope, it's just water, the whole thing. Nobody mentioned that. That's just a nitpick, but...
Yeah, they at least react to the crazy giant waves.
Well, yeah.
Jelani, did you have more notes for this topic?
Not really. Just I definitely can't tell where the line between science and fiction is. As I said before, I've never seen a NASA. I'm not an astronaut. I don't have astronaut friends yet, anyway. I couldn't fact check them. I didn't take out my notebook or anything and double check their equations and whatnot. I was just along for the ride.
On a vaguely related note, like a slight mini topic, what do you guys think about, like, the ending sequence after the Tesseract stuff? Because I didn't notice it the first time as much, but it feels, I guess, afterlife-y when he's in a station named after himself that looks like home, and then he meets his daughter again, who sends him away. In my head, I'm like, is he dead? Is that kind of what we're going for here? And maybe they meant that, like, symbolically, because the way that they do the shots, they do imply that he's actually going to go find Anne Hathaway. Not even to set up a sequel, but to show, like, that there's going to be more stuff happening.
Nah, he's not dead. If he was dead, his daughter wouldn't be dying in his after. Bro, I swear I keep seeing something and it is freaking me out.
Is it a ghost?
That's actually what I'm thinking it is.
Is it telling you to stay?
I think it's a... I'm not joking. I think it's...
Don't ever leave Earth! No!
I think
Don't
it's
ever leave Earth!
So, my
No one's gonna leave!
grandfather had a cat that got sick, and the night she passed, right before she passed, she fell down the stairs. And I keep seeing something move by the stairs. Like, as small as a cat, like I keep seeing a tail wave. And I just keep seeing that at the corner of my eye, and it's freaking me the hell out.
That's trippy.
I don't believe in ghosts. This house has never had ghosts.
I mean, not that you've seen. I'll stop.
But not that I've... Yeah. Anyway.
It felt very afterlife-y to me. In some ways feels a little too, like, clean and, you know, tying a bow on everything. Also, he doesn't ask about Timothy Affleck. He doesn't ask about his son. He only cares about Murph. You can make jokes about it throughout the whole movie, but at the very least at the beginning, he shows some affection towards his son. As soon as he's, like, gone, and then he finally comes back, he only asks about his daughter. He does not care about Tom at all, as if he saw all the scenes where Tom was like a mini villain for a little bit.
He let the crops die, that's why.
He did let the crops die. Yeah. But again, Coop couldn't have known that. So why doesn't he ask about his son?
He was just disappointed he didn't turn into Ben Affleck instead.
I guess. I wanted you to be in Batman and not Manchester by the Sea.
You telling me my son could have been Batman? No, I don't think he's dead, because if he was dead in the afterlife, why would his daughter be dying?
Yeah, I guess that makes sense, but I don't know. It maybe like as a last goodbye opportunity or something. It felt odd. I guess also like that's a very large chunk of time to lose compared to the rest of the movie, because like he loses like 20 years and she turns into Jessica Chastain, to go back to the whole thing, the line about like they might even be the same age, which I get that and that works really well. But then all of a sudden, like he's lost for a while, and then he comes back and he's over 100 years old and she's like 90.
Yeah, where did he? Didn't he have to pee? He was just.
Well, he was in like he was in like cryosleep, I think they said. Like
in
when
space?
they found him, he was running out of oxygen.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I guess it was only a few minutes for him.
Gravity just kind of took care of it while he was in the black hole, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was actually watching a video too, asking
nobody can see you do it.
Do they age in cryosleep? Because that's actually a good question. Because in certain, well, it depends on like the sci-fi concept, like the way that they approach it. Because sometimes like you don't. Sometimes like you're basically just asleep and you do age, even if it's a little bit slower. You know, like the reason that the guy that stayed on the ship got older is because he stopped sleeping. He slept for a little bit, but then he's like, well, I'm just gonna try to figure out all the stuff that we couldn't figure out. That's also another thing that pulled me out of it a little. I do think he would have been a little crazier after all that isolation.
Because it freezes your cells. Well, it's supposed to, in theory. I don't think we have cryo. I think people have tried on Earth, but it's straight up, it's been proven it just kills you.
Yeah, basically.
Because it's frostbite.
Yeah, so there's probably not scientific basis for it. I have heard, this also hasn't been tested, but I remember learning in some science class that if you travel at the speed of light, you don't age. The way it was explained to me was like if you had two twins and you had one travel at light speed for a while and the other stayed on Earth, they would be a different age. That's not being played with here, but that could be like some other Interstellar explained explanation. I don't like to read it as he's dead. I'd rather keep it as is. I can understand the reading. It's kind of the same reason I don't like thinking the end of Inception's a dream. It just kind of makes the rest of the movie feel a little more worth it. I won't litigate that because that's a whole thing. But like those sorts of theories, I tend to not like the idea that like, oh, they're just dead and it's all a dream.
I apply that to Nope. I don't like thinking that, even though that's what I thought at first at the end of the movie, I don't like thinking that OJ is dead.
Yeah,
I feel like that works a little better there, but generally, yeah, it's like, not that it's a cop-out, but it's just kind of like, well, usually feels like the less interesting ending. So I kind of prefer it to not.
And like you said, in a lot of ways, it does make it feel less worth it. You know?
Yeah.
Where it's like they kind of did all of that, and then, you know, they're in whatever it is, the afterlife anyway. And, like, that might be good for them, but, like, for the audience watching it, sometimes it doesn't feel as satisfying.
Same goes for, like, cartoon conspiracies. Like, they were dead the whole time. Like, bro, Why are all of these everybody's dead the whole time, or they're in limbo and they're in hell the whole time? Like,
Or
what?
it's the Matrix or whatever, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that can be fun to a certain extent. I think when you're like looking at it a little more base level, I prefer to not read it that way.
And I think in this case, it actually does line up because there's a lot of religious imagery and themes in this. So I think it would kind of line up with all of those anyway, even if he's not actually dead. This is kind of like the best ending he could have gotten in this situation. So it kind of comes out as like ethereal.
My topic was entertainment and exploration. What's great about space movies is that we don't know about a ton about space in real life, right, guys? We're still technically just looking for intelligent life. We know a lot about like celestial bodies, maybe, and stars and moons, but to be on them, like be physically on them, is something entirely different. And with that unknown element, you get great space movies because the mind just runs rampant. Alien, right? Star Wars, Guardians of the Galaxy, Treasure Planet. I think it's been a while. I don't know.
Treasure Planet.
Treasure Planet is the bomb. We gotta do that one day.
Elysium, I guess, because they do go to space. Dune, maybe. I haven't finished part 1 yet, so no spoilers. Jupiter Ascending.
From what I've heard,
I've seen
probably
bits
shouldn't
of
say
it.
what I've heard.
I've heard the world building's actually really cool, although Sean Bean is part B. So do with that what you will.
There's puns to be made, I'm sure.
Valerian and the City of 1,000 Planets. So, just all around good movies. A commonality in the movies I've mentioned, though, is that there's always an enemy, someone to fight. In this movie, without having a bad person to, like, blame all of the events on, kind of, man is, as Cooper puts it, a coward, but still, like, he screws them over. We're more against the elements. Nature, as Ram puts it, it's them, then a few feet, or whatever the measurement was, of aluminum between them, and what's really, like, instant death. We actually do see a death that happens that way. But what I'm getting at is, with my topic, is the movie is entertaining without needing a core antagonist. It's about embarking on a dangerous, unknown journey and saving the lives back on Earth. And the venture itself was exciting and engaging, emotionally grounded, and mysterious given the nature of the uninhabited planets. Something as simple as a water planet having a giant wave was terrifying. And the Nolans do a great job setting up our tether to Earth through Cooper, so it's not just about waiting for the next thing to happen, because that... I think without that tether, I 100% would have disliked this more. Because I would have just been waiting like, alright, bro, what are we doing with this movie? I need something more to happen other than just them sitting around talking in the damn space station. Every second spent on the mission is precious, and it increases exponentially when they begin visiting the planets around... The black hole's name is Gargantua, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So it's a great ticking clock element. In fiction, literature, whatever, there are only 9 conflicts to be told: man versus nature, man versus man, man versus God, man versus society, man versus self, man versus no God, man versus technology, man versus reality, and man versus author. This has a couple of them wrapped in it: nature, man, self. It's mainly man versus nature, both in space and on Earth. The visuals are also great, but if Nolan's not one for CGI, he definitely had to get a real black... I don't know the black hole actor's name, but they did a great job. But also, side note, there's nothing really to do with my topic, but I didn't care for how skipped over Ram's time was in the station with the 23 years that had passed. They also spent no time apologizing or even really feeling sorry for someone who thought they were dead for over 2 decades.
Well, no, remember, Amelia, that's her name, right? She touched his face and was like, "You look old now."
Yeah.
So all was forgiven.
Yeah. I was saying this before. I genuinely think he would have gone way crazier by that point. Like, he
People
kind of
go
looked hesitant when they were about to touch him, like they weren't real, but it was glossed over in like 2 seconds.
people go insane after like 2 weeks in solitary confinement in prison.
Yeah, exactly. Matt Damon's character went crazy, and he was in cryosleep for most of that time, I think. And what's worse is like he actually had his robot with him. Like I think there's a prequel comic with him, and he had his robot with him the whole time, so he had somebody to talk to.
Well,
Whereas they
Romley
took
had TARS as well. If
no,
you remember.
Tars went to the planet with them. Remember?
Yeah.
No,
Tarzan's-
Case goes with them. TARS stays back.
Oh.
Oh, okay.
I think it's still a valid point, though. I don't think it ruins it for me, but it's yeah. There could have been more done with that. Small
There's
gripe, but gripe nonetheless.
glossed over.
Yeah,
Like
I think
how,
it's done in for the same reason that we talked about, like why there's no aliens. Like it does make it leaner. They're trying not to focus too much on like not really side plots, but kind of like side plots. Like they're keeping to the main conflicts of what's going on,
Yeah, I get it.
and these
yeah.
other things just kind of get mentioned. So like I kind of get it, but I agree with you. I think that more could have and should have been done with that.
Also, Doyle's death was kind of just like, they were just like, yeah, tell that to Doyle. They lost one of their 4 members of the crew. That's pretty significant as well. But, okay.
Yeah. And then right after they lose the other guy, they lose the other dude because he explodes.
Right. I think they cried more over the person we never saw that crashed on the water planet than Romley or Doyle.
Yeah.
It is a little
And
unceremonious.
also the other guy, his love transcended time and space. That we
Edmonds,
never actually
who we
got
never
to meet.
meet. Yeah.
Oh, Edmund
Yeah.
Wolf. Yeah, I think he died in his crash too, didn't he?
Oh yeah, I think
that's
at the
why she
very
was crying.
end, like the last shot of Amelia on the planet,
She's
which we
burying
also
him.
don't get really just. I think she buried him. I think we see like the grave or whatever.
Nitpicks, though. I enjoyed the movie regardless.
To go to your topic, I agree with what you said. It is impressive that like they can do this without a capital V villain. There's still a lot of like there's a second act or end of act 2 twist with the betrayal from Dr. Mann and Brant Sr.
I saw it coming when he wouldn't look at... He told them not to look at Kip's logs. I didn't think he rigged it to explode.
I forgot about that.
But I saw that coming as soon as he was like hesitant about that. I was like, and you've been alone for how long? Yeah, you're crazy.
I think I clocked that this time, but I definitely would not have first time around. There's a lot here that keeps things tense, and it is impressive because there are other movies that, you know, it's not ones that you mentioned in your earlier list, but there are space movies.
No, because that was a good list. That was a list of great space movies.
I'll
Yeah.
I'll push back on a couple, but I'll not right now.
At the top, obviously, is Jupiter Ascending.
Of course,
Slash
it's
the
already
Sun
ascended.
movie.
Jupiter ascended. Yeah.
Yep, it ascended to the top of the list. But there's other space movies that are more about just exploration that are not as entertaining. I recently saw Ad Astra, which I guess is not so much an exploration movie, but that was pretty tough to get through. Or the movie that Nolan is sort of homaging with this. I know he's at least talked about
A Space Odyssey.
2001: A Space Odyssey.
I
think
saw that.
intensely does not work.
I can't watch it again.
Did not care
Same.
about that movie whatsoever.
It took me so long to finish it because I remember I started it and it's like 3 minutes of darkness and music
Oof.
and then a bone flying in the air, and I'm like, I have to turn this off. Finally, I did watch it, and it's like, I understand why people love it. It could have been half as long.
It could have been a third as long. I think it's like 2.5 hours. It could have been probably 40 minutes tops.
That phrasing is hilarious. You see a bone fly. I have to turn this off.
I think my cat's upset. I think we woke her up
Okay.
Oh.
talking about space. She's glaring at me right now.
Oh, well, maybe she'll survive Alien with you one day. But to compare to 2001, like, there's other issues I think that make that movie boring, and I know that's kind of heresy, but whatever. That doesn't have the same kind of narrative hooks that this movie does to keep us engaged. It does kind of have, I think for the time, there was visual spectacle, but I have a feeling this is going to hold up significantly better. And granted, Interstellar is kind of standing on 2001's shoulders, but which is more watchable? I think it's this by a mile
Oh
because
yeah.
you need to if you're just doing exploration, that needs to have a little bit more to it than that. At face value, discovering new information is kind of entertaining. Like that's kind of what something like National Treasure, very different movie, but in a lot of ways, like every time they get a new clue, like that's just part of the enjoyment. And I think you can do like an exploration based movie a little bit like that. It is kind of cool to just see, okay, they're talking a bit about these planets that they aren't sure are inhabitable. So there is kind of a question in our head when they go down to each one, how inhabitable is this? It's like kind of priming us for exposition in a way where we don't realize it. And it's just like that is an entertaining thing to see.
Seeing that wave for the first time, I was just like, y'all can't stay here.
Crazy.
Yeah. And I think that water planet scene is maybe where I guess like the two facets of your topic are at their peak here is that you have really high entertainment value that is largely just like we're in a new place, what is it like? Oh crap, there's a massive wave coming. But it has like you were bringing up a few things earlier, like physical stakes, emotional stakes, visual spectacle, time urgency, new information, massive consequences. All of those are firing at like super high cylinders in that scene. And we can kind of like clock all of them. It's not even necessarily like something you pick up on a rewatch. Like first time around, you're like, oh no, Romley or Doyle's gonna die. Oh no, they're gonna lose an hour, which is 10 years or whatever. Oh no, the ship might get wrecked. Oh, he's not gonna see his daughter until she's freaking 90.
Oh,
And
she's got to get the logs from the crash, and yeah.
yeah, and like this wave just looks freaking awesome. All of those things are in your head first time watching it. Like how many scenes have some like I think that scene's just awesome. It's not just because we're seeing a huge wave hit a spaceship. It's because there's so much like that scene is science fiction. Science elements on full display, fiction like to play it up, and
Yeah.
all like the narrative storytelling tools firing on all cylinders. It's awesome.
And then within like, okay, they made it past the first wave, and then there's another within a few minutes of screen time, but I think they were there for a little longer. But then there's another,
They had
and
to
it's
be,
like,
but it's also confusing timeline wise because they're talking for like 4 minutes, but they imply that they're going to be stuck there for another hour. It's very weird.
yeah, but there's another wave right there, and it's like, they gotta go, bro. Yeah, I can't build nothing here, even though the water is like a kiddie pool.
Until the wave.
But like, first of all, is that salt water? If it's not salt water, great. But you have nothing to eat because we don't see any, I don't know, knee fish or whatever it is. Like, it's just, it's very clear that the person who went there died instantly. And on that planet, they just died too. So many bad things could happen.
Very quickly.
And then they already lost somebody already. Like, it's just impossible.
I think water like destroys over time anyway, so they wouldn't be able to keep anything stable there over time.
Unless they built, like, boats. But even with boats, like, you have to have a boat that can ride, like a surfboard boat that can just ride waves all the time. And that's not going to work. But I will say, even with that, too, one thing I appreciate, because we were talking about with, like, exploration, I think it would have been a much easier and more, like, crowd-pleasing option to make the planets feel very gimmicky, but they don't. I think that's what's interesting about it. And I think it's what you were talking about, Evan, with, like, the fact that it ties so much into the storytelling and the themes with, like, each hurdle that they go past. And I feel like they use the environment as opposed to having a flashy environment to, like, have a flashy environment sequence. And I think some of that comes from the fact that, like, they limit themselves to basically these two planets. They have a few sequences, but they've got, like, the wormhole. they've got like the black holes like a background basically. This planet has the water and the waves, but it's a lot more about the time dilation issue that's going to happen. The planet with the frozen clouds basically, but a lot more of the conflict there is less about like, dealing with alien polar bears or something, and it's about Dr. Man sort of betraying everybody so that he can get rescued, right? And then after that, you've got like the Tesseract stuff, which is its own thing, but again, all of it ties in thematically with each other. So it keeps it from feeling like we're just going to one cool planet after the other to keep things interesting. Instead, we're like actually moving through the story.
I also think keeping the threats of the planets minimal also made them scarier.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like I think because there's mystery behind each of them, or both of them. Like for the frozen cloud planet, ice planet, learning that there was no surface made it actually more terrifying to me, because it's just like, what is it, all mountains? So where does this hole that dude is about to be kicked down go?
Yeah. It's sort of like the concept, like, how crazy is, like, the concept of, like, a gas giant planet, right? Where there's, like, that it's a planet, it's, like, a spherical thing that you can see, but there's no surface of, like, Jupiter. And that's insane just on its own. Like, the idea that you could just go straight through this thing, essentially.
And it retains its form.
Yeah, which is crazy.
Ever.
Right? But it makes it so that, like, I think, like, that's very accurate what you're talking about with, like, the fact that the threats themselves are, like, I feel like they're really simple, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they're sort of blown up to these giant proportions that are almost incomprehensible. But in base concept, something like a tidal wave is something that we're familiar with. Something like a desolate frozen landscape is something that we could imagine on Earth, right?
Non-breathable
Just like, let's say
air.
they did, like, a desert planet, where it's so dry there that like maybe your skin's cracking and bleeding as you're walking, or like the rocks are so jagged they're like cutting your feet, stuff like that. Like, but it's such a high extreme, but because the base premise itself is familiar enough, it just makes it seem bigger and scarier without seeming, for lack of a better term, like a Star Wars planet where there's like one ecosystem for the entire thing.
And it's also scary, and a reason I'm afraid of, or why the Final Destination series freaks me out, is because it has no face. There's no reasoning with nature. Like, nature just does what it does, as Anne Hathaway puts it in the movie. It's not evil, frightening, formidable, whatever she says. Yeah, without it being evil, it's just doing what it does. There's no reasoning with, hey, wave, can you chill out? We're trying to escape.
Yeah. In that way, like, in Final Destination, like, death is a concept in a way, but like it's coming after them as a force of nature, not as a character. Like, it does, like, it's not like they're fighting Satan. It's just coming, and it's just happening to them.
It's gonna do this regardless of whether you're here or not.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's scarier than if they fought like some weird space monster, like you're saying. I think that's true. It's almost a cliche of space movies, I think, at this point, but it works. Like, I forget exactly how long ago it was, but I think SNL made this sketch called Space Mistakes, where it was like a fake trailer for a space movie. And
I kind of love that.
The joke is like, I gotta go back up, baby, but it's in space. What if you make a mistake? And it's like playing up like these.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah,
I'm probably doing it wrong, but like you have like this is one of the movies that it's riffing on in that sketch, but it's also a cliche because it's all you need in a movie like this. When the vacuum of space, I think you said earlier, Jelani, instant death, and Romilly says like, oh, there's millimeters of aluminum. Yeah, when one thing's go wrong, you are screwed. And that can be dramatic enough. Like, the docking sequence is
simple as that.
Tense.
Crazy.
So if you added, like, Star Trek kind of space battles
alien
on top
laser
of that,
blasts and, like, yeah,
it actually kind of undercuts the tension because you're thinking about, like, action movie logic and not human base level survival logic, which is often much more tense. And I think it's a success of this movie. It is still a cliche, and I think something that does it probably even harder is Gravity, which is a fairly
Yeah,
easy
I'm sure.
comparison
I haven't seen it
to
before, but
make.
I've heard. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gravity is pretty much just space mistakes. Like, that's the whole thing, is just Sandra Bullock's in space and something's gonna go wrong really bad.
Guys, can we write a script together called Space Mistakes? I feel like we're made for this.
I think it's been done
We'd have to
because
change the
gravity
name.
exists.
We'd
Because
have to change the
gravity.
name too.
I should rewatch that sketch. I was thinking about it while I was doing my notes. I hadn't in years, but it's just kind of funny that it is all you need. It's just, you're in space. What if you make a mistake?
That kind of thing, it's why I think the Desolate Waste Planet is scarier than the Tidal Planet. Because imagine just like falling and there's no surface. You're just hitting ice clouds, but you're not falling into anything. Like you could just fall forever.
I would imagine it like evens out around the equator where you can't fall through to the other side, so you just stay in the middle. I don't know how that works.
He also says, like, I've explored the, like, other parts of the planet. I'm like, okay, did you circumnavigate it, though? Like, you're one guy, even if he's been here for 20 years or whatever. That's a long time to explore an entire planet. Maybe it is just kind of like the other planets that we are just in real life familiar with, where, as far as we can tell, I think, like, every other planet in our solar system seems to be basically the same throughout. It's just like Mars is red sand and rocks, and then Jupiter
Oh,
is
you mean
just
same
gas.
ecosystems?
Yeah, like, it's
Yeah.
not like Earth where you have, like, deserts and oceans and rainforests or whatever.
Well, but
Like,
the thing is, like,
the biomes
if
are
Mars
the
was
same.
terraformed, a lot of times, like, there would be different ecosystems. It's because they don't have like any ecosystem really. You know?
Right, but it's kind of a question here of, like, which rules are you playing by? Because that's something I've thought about with other space movies too. Like Star Wars planets, you tend to go to one spot of each of them, and it's like Tatooine's the desert planet, Endor is the forest planet or whatever, and you just kind of think of them as one regular ecosystem throughout the whole thing because that's all we see of it. But if they were planets like Earth, they might not actually be that way. They might be just as diverse as Earth is in terms of ecosystems. On the other hand, they might also be like Mars. It's a weird line because, granted, I don't know the science on this, and we haven't found other, like, life-habitable planets, but I think the ones that are habitable probably would more likely be like Earth and have that diversity, whereas ones that can't, they can't for a reason, which is it's kind of one size fits all here.
Like Venus.
Yeah,
It's,
like Venus.
Yeah, essentially,
Toxic
yeah. And
throughout.
like as far as Star Wars goes specifically, a lot of them are one ecosystem, which is a lot of the reason that people give George Lucas crap for like how he designs planets because he goes very simple, like, oh, this is a forest planet, this is a desert planet, this is an
Ice
ice
planet.
planet. Yeah,
I
exactly.
cut him some
And like
slack
it's
on
a
it.
science fantasy thing, so it's fine. Like it if you're looking at it from a sci-fi perspective, yeah, it feels a little lazy sometimes. But in general, like for Star Wars, it works just fine because each planet is essentially treated like a mythical city location in like a regular fantasy world where you're on one planet and you're like, oh, we're going to like the elf city or we're going to like this city that's like in the middle of a vast desert and that would be like Tatooine, right? So for the purposes of Star Wars, generally it kind of works.
Yeah, and like in the case of Interstellar, I feel like you don't want to play with that same language. Like, one, there's just runtime constraints of you can only spend so much time on each planet. You also have like budgetary restrictions on locations. But there are plot reasons why maybe Miller's planet has land on it, but they can't afford to look around there because that'll take them 200 years of Earth time to even get a passing glance at, like, is there a shore? So,
And they sent one guy to each planet too.
I think it's a thing to be taken into account. And it's this, Jelani, are we done with your topic? Because this can kind of transition into mine a little bit. So my topic was fiction, science, and emotion, which are like the three elements that have to be balanced in... I said this movie when I started out, the more I've been thinking about it, I think it's true of all sci-fi. And a lot of times, to kind of continue the thread we were just talking about, science fantasy, to me, generally throws the science element out the window and just says, like, we have cool technology. It's basically going to work like magic, and we're going to do some cool stuff here. I tend to prefer stuff that deals with somewhat more grounded science concepts, but it is a little bit tougher sometimes, and I think this movie definitely does it well, but from what I've heard, there was a lot of time spent on like studying the science of it and incorporating it properly, and I'm sure that took a lot more work. We can hype this up as a lot better than other things, but like there's a reason other stuff cuts corners, because if you don't, sometimes, you know, you spend 7 years going down like all of these science research threads trying to figure out how can we be as accurate as possible when dealing with a black hole, something that nobody has ever actually explored. All three elements, fiction, science, and emotion, are functioning pretty well here. You have some pretty complex science topics that are being talked about a lot and are very significant. You can say that they're stretched, but they're not tacked on. They're important. That said, the fiction element comes in because there's liberties taken with them. You're sending messages through gravity from the future. I'm going to guess that's not a thing we'll ever be able to do. And then, we mentioned earlier, you're just completely making up what's inside of a black hole by the end of this movie. They have science concepts tied into it, but that's just made up. And then the third element, you have a very strong emotional core with the father-daughter storyline that's anchoring this whole movie. And it gives the decisions that the characters make more emotional weight and higher stakes. It feels like a thing that I often criticize of just like, oh, give them a kid or his wife died. That approach to character. But I think this is kind of a testament against that, where if you have something like that anchoring it and it matters and it's the right thing to combine with your genre and your concept, it can work really well. And I think this was a very good pairing. To throw it to you guys, do you think this balances the elements well? Fiction, science, and emotion.
I think for the most part, yes. I think we've touched on a couple points where I think they do fumble a little bit. Like, one of my big things with the emotional element is if we're talking about the emotional hook and grounding for Coop, why did they give him two kids if he only loves one? That's kind of my question. No, but honestly, I think it's a big thing. It's a lot less evident at the beginning, and I actually think that having Tom in there works really well to set up a lot of the world building for the Earth stuff. Because they do establish that, like, he's got two kids that are very smart. They have a lot of Murphy is seen as, like, the closest to Cooper as far as intelligence level. They do touch on later, too, like, I think Tom says in one of the video messages he finished second in school. So he's also very book smart like Coop, but because they can't have everybody go to college anymore and pursue, like, more academic fields, except, like, the top one student, he doesn't get to go. In a way, that sets up a lot where, like, yeah, he is pretty smart, but he's kind of resigned himself to, like, well, this is what our life is, you know, being on this farm or whatever. But then that doesn't land later necessarily because his character gets turned into almost nothing as far as, like, Coop's storyline. Because Coop forgets that he has a son.
I don't understand why he decides to be mean as an adult. He let his dad go, like, yeah, I get that, but, like, he's, like, holding his family hostage and keeping them sick or whatever in the dust.
I have a really hard time following that sequence. That's, like, the one
it feels
part
a little
of the movie that doesn't
tropey
really work.
in some ways. It feels like they're making it so that, like, he's like that guy who lives on a farm who doesn't like change, but they're implying that the entire world is kind of like that in a way. It almost feels like they did it to give Murph a conflict in that part of it so that they could do the cross-cutting between, like, her and whatever was going on with Coop at that time. I don't remember what it was. I know whatever was going on the spaceship was more important. Or, like,
yeah,
much
it's hard
more...
to get locked into those stakes. There might be a solidly written conflict there, but I've never clocked it. I don't know if you've watched this, Angel, but there's a Lessons from the Screenplay video that breaks down that cross-cut
that's
sequence.
what I'm thinking of.
And they compare it to some
sequence,
other Nolan crosscuts. And I think the biggest element that I remember they call out in it is that there should be clear and comparably sized stakes to every like part of a crosscut, and you don't have that with the farm section. I think it could still work. Do you need that? I don't feel like it adds anything.
No, but they could have lined up at least like as far as like one could have been like very physical stakes, which is like the space stuff. The other could have been like very emotional stakes, but the problem is that I think that
I think they're trying for that. They are
I
trying
do think
for
they're
it
trying
with
for
the
that.
conflict. It's just not set up.
The threat as far as like the stuff on the farm doesn't feel as immediate, right? Because this is a long-term illness and condition that his son has, right? They're not implying that like, Tom's going to kill his family or something's going to happen if they don't leave right at that moment, right? So it doesn't feel as pressing for that conflict to resolve itself because Tom isn't saying he's going to do anything to hurt his family and his kid is not going to die from an illness right now if he doesn't leave. Like, yes, obviously they can no longer stay there, but
There's not an urgency to it.
the threat doesn't feel as immediate as it does with what was going on with the other stuff, just because of like the nature of what the space conflicts were. It does make it feel a lot less pressing, and I think that that's where some of it doesn't necessarily work is when they try to like sort of juxtapose the two. We also get significantly less of Murph and her life on Earth, I feel like. Like, we get a good amount of a sequence with her, but we only see her in the context of this place. Some of her relationship to Michael Caine's character, and that's about it. Like, we don't get a sense of who she is outside of this thing with her dad, or, this research or whatever. We don't see what her life has been like other than that. And maybe it's because it's meant to tie into the rest of it better, but it just made parts of it feel kind of hollow character-wise.
That's fair. I still think the elements are mixed well for the most part. Jelani, how did you feel like they blended?
Nah, it's balanced well to me. I think it's also paced well. The only time I wanted it to speed up was the beginning, because I really wanted to get to space. I really wanted to go interstellar. And the come on tar scene, I understood the necessity of that scene because I saw this movie now. I also thought the NASA reveal was really cool. Like, once NASA's revealed, I'm like, okay, we're cooking something here. Now we're getting to space, right? The come on tar scene was just a side note, something someone animated. Our final for, I think it was Animation 1, when I was still an animation major in Drexel, was to find a scene from a movie and animate like household objects with it. I did the Deadpool highway scene with like a blender, a fridge, and a teapot, I think. This guy did it, I think whatever was spinning, I think the ship was like a ceiling fan for his project. Every week the professor allowed people to show their progress on their project and ask for feedback. So I heard that one scene a lot, so I was kind of just waiting for that.
Is that when they're docking or when they're
I think so.
Okay.
Like when he's trying to manually dock.
Okay, that one, yeah.
But I had no idea what the hell it was about until actually seeing the movie. So I was just looking at household appliances and listening to the audio, but I was just like, who the hell is Tars? What kind of name was that? The only thing that started to lose me was the black hole scene, and I mentioned earlier, I'm pretty sure a black hole would just kill you.
You mean like the Tesseract sequence, right, at the end?
Is that what it is? When he's
That's
inside
what it's called,
the black
yeah.
hole? Yeah.
Yeah, when he's floating and he's, don't let me leave, Murph, all that, yeah.
And he's looking at what looks like the entire
Movie.
The entire movie, but zoomed out from an editor's perspective. Yeah.
Yes. He's looking through a
The
bookshelf.
frame by frame.
Yeah, but I knew we were close to the end at that point, and I had already been along for the ride, so I was just like, all right, sure.
Yeah. That's when these movies can go kind of like a little more out there, because like the movie's about to end anyway. Like, if you start there, you kind of have to escalate after that, and that's when...
Then we do
a lot
need
of
to
times
see
you
the
can't.
aliens. Then we need to see the
Yeah,
aliens.
exactly. Like, if the movie had started there, or that had been like the midpoint, then you got to see aliens after that.
Well, I think that's part of the balance that you have to strike is if you're going to have a complex science concept, and you're going to throw in this big fictional element with it, you got to scale those properly. Like, I was thinking back to a science fiction movie that we did not enjoy on this show, which was Lucy. And we talked about when we did that, she gets to 100% of her brain, but by 30%, she's doing god level things, time traveling at 70 or whatever. So if you're gonna do that, just save it for the end and we'll have an easier time buying it. If this movie started with Michael Caine being like, well, we think 5-dimensional beings are like...
No, do it in his
communicating with
voice.
us through...
Do it in his voice.
Cooper, we believe that they are 5-dimensional beings communicating with us through gravity to save humanity through a wormhole.
And they may be the size of a tangerine.
The size of a tangerine. I wasn't planning to break that out this time. But if you start there, that's a big thing to open your movie with. So you gotta, like, build up to that and keep everything a little more grounded. And one of the notes that I had was, if this movie is going to end with Cooper sending the coordinates or like the data to save humanity using the power of gravity to his daughter because love can transcend time, you gotta earn all of that. So, like, it's not just...
That is wild without context. Even with context.
Right. Imagine if that's the only scene that you watched. Just the Tesseract scene.
I wouldn't bother watching the rest of the movie because I'm just...
No.
Why would I want to... What?
It sounds ridiculous. So you need to, like...
Even Cooper said it's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He's literally in it, and he's like Tar's explaining it to him. He's like, this doesn't make any goddamn sense. I don't know. I live on a farm. Where's my daughter?
I don't have a son. What do you mean?
I just want to play baseball.
I sort of turned into the lesser Affleck brother. I don't want to see what Mark turned out to be. Probably turned into one of them lesser Olsen sisters.
Like Danielle Olsen. I don't know who that is.
Is that a real person?
No, it's not.
I didn't know if there was a hidden sister that I didn't know about.
I wish they would have explored what exactly the Tara's case and Kip are. Maybe I missed something in the movie, but I like their chemistry addition to the cast, specifically Tara's, because, I mean, he was the funny one. Even though they're robots, I wanted a bit more on that, because it just felt like we were supposed to just buy that. I mean, I did, but, like, to know what exactly they were. It would have been nice to know.
I think there's some line to indicate they, like, were made for military use, but that's all I can remember.
Yeah, but there's no militaries anymore. That's definitely a line Coop says to one of the guards, I think, is that there's no militaries anymore, so maybe they were, but, like, and that's an interesting, like, little background thing to show, like, how much repurposed technology there is now.
I don't know how they were supposed to work with the military, but I did like the progression of, like, seeing what they were capable of as far as, like, physically. Like, I thought all they could do was just shuffle around, but they, like, have different forms, like a
early iteration Transformer almost.
Yeah. Also, I thought I'd be surprised as to who voiced them. Like, I was trying to see if I recognized the voice. Like, I was like, one of them's got to be, like, Cillian Murphy or something, right?
That'd be sick, but no.
Yeah, I only know the Case's actor from The Collector, which is a horror movie that I didn't actually see. I just saw a kill count on it.
Oh, I think I did see that.
And How to Survive on it. Also, Evan, you have a note about emotions. You want to mention that? Because I have a note for that, too.
Yeah, so I've heard this movie get criticized, and all of Nolan's movies, but also this one. People say he has characters talk about emotions, but not show very much of them, and people don't feel them. People call out the love is the one thing we can feel that transcends time, that line, that conversation. I feel like even if that conversation reads a bit awkward, we're not going to buy the climax without that conversation. And for the movie more broadly, this has a really solid emotional core. Like,
yeah,
I think this is one of the best cases against that. People, I think, cherry pick, like, there's other Nolan movies you can, like, Tenet does not have, I think Tenet is probably the Nolan movie that's most similar to this. And I enjoy that more, but this is a better movie because it has a much better character story there. Inception has it, but I think I like DiCaprio's performance in that movie, but he's a lot colder than McConaughey is here. So I can understand that being
McConaughey is very emotional, as evidenced by my background.
Yeah.
But this is
There you
definitely
go.
Nolan's most emotional movie, where like outright displays of emotion, which is maybe why that one scene feels a little stilted because they're very logical during that conversation. Like they're having a logical argument almost.
Mm-hmm.
Which at that point in the movie, there's a lot of emotion by that point already, so it feels a little off. It also feels like weird to me. Like I noticed it this time that he is talking about how like love has purpose, yes, like social utility. Like he's very cold about the way that he's explaining it, and I know it's to let her know that she's thinking about this particular thing too emotionally and that she could be wrong.
He was also angry at her. I don't think it's any secret. He was angry at her. She knew.
Yeah.
Because
No,
of the whole...
definitely for sure. It did feel very stilted compared to his other like scenes in the movie because he's a very emotional character.
I'm gonna defend that a little. I think it was him trying to put on a face to hide his anger. So that's why he approached it that way.
Yeah, no, I definitely understand it. But I just mean I think I understand why it makes the scene feel a little more stilted than it needs to be, and feel like slightly more like out of place. I do think it works fine. I don't really have a problem with that scene because I get like it's about she's very desperate and so is he in a lot of ways, and he is angry.
This little maneuver is gonna cost us 51 years. Sorry, it had to be said. Also, yeah, I wanted to just defend against that. Like, I don't understand how this gets criticized. How much crying was there in this movie? I said myself,
legitimately
like,
just this. No, that's not true. The kid cries.
She cries, and then she
cries again as an
Murph
adult.
cries again as an adult, trying to...
Michael Caine cries.
Michael Caine cries.
The Tesseract scene?
The Tesseract scene...
does not cry. The black hole cries a little bit.
Well, yes.
But that's just because his actor delivered a sensational emotional performance.
The planet was nothing but water. We don't know if it was salt water, but, that's planet nothing but tears. Yeah.
And Jesus wept because there were no worlds left to conquer.
And for all we know, that whole planet was all Matt Damon's frozen tears. That ice planet.
Could be.
Maybe that's why the air was...
They took him out of the thing too, and it was full of water. How do we know that was water? Like just water.
Yeah.
Anyway, you were saying, Delani.
Yeah, I was close to crying myself a couple of times. I think it was this scene. I forget exactly what the scene was, though.
It's when they get back from Miller's planet. Yeah. And he's going
through 20 years of
messages
messages from his kids.
Yeah.
Like, he legitimately watches Tom grow up and, like, tell him about his family, about how he lost his son. Like, he goes through an emotional arc in the span of, like, 10 minutes. Like, a full emotional... Because he's happy, his son gets married, he has kids, then he has to watch his grandson die.
And then watch his son let him go thinking he's dead, and he can't say anything to that. Like, that's crazy. How is that?
Lose his mind. And not just that, too, but, like, this is also talk about his daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Like, talk about Murph and not see her. You know what I loved, actually, this time? I didn't notice it until this watch. The music legitimately stops when it gets to Murph's message. Like, it cuts hard. And then she just shows up, and the first thing you hear is her voice. It hits really, really hard. It was really a good choice.
This is weird. I thought the kid kind of... As I saw Anne Hathaway was on the cast, so I thought there was some weird time thing where, like, the kid grew up into Anne Hathaway, not Jessica Chastain. And I was like, wait, is she from the future? That's weird. Because I knew something weird would happen with time in this movie because it involves a black hole. So.
And it's a Nolan movie, so that's kind of a given.
Oh, yeah, that's... Oh, wait.
If nothing weird is happening with time in the plot, he's going to make it non-linear for some other reason.
It did... well, you can't even say it wasn't in The Dark Knight because there was a countdown before Rachel exploded.
Yeah, I think The Dark Knight's probably his most straightforward time-wise.
It is, yeah, because the Batman Begins plays a lot with time.
Batman Begins is pretty non-linear. I think it's easy to
yeah.
follow, but
Most of his movies are easy to follow, I think, like timeline-wise. But he jumps around
not
a lot.
Tenet. Not Tenet. And even The
Tenet-
Prestige, like, The Prestige is pretty digestible.
I didn't want to trash Tenet because I know you love it.
No, you can absolutely trash Tenet, and I would trash Tenet for that because it's hard to follow. But even The Prestige, I think the timeline, I've seen that several times, and I'm still not entirely sure when exactly things happen relative to each other. But you can still follow.
Yeah.
It. Anyway, yes, time of course is going to be messed with, but I think this actually is told essentially in a linear sense. From Cooper's perspective, we are like not jumping through time as him. We're experiencing it as he does, which I think is vital.
After the Odyssey, Nolan remakes In Time.
Honestly, I'd be here for that.
Actually, he should have a stage in his career where he remakes all these time movies, like About Time, that rom-com one.
Oh yeah.
Avengers Endgame. That's got time in it.
That does have time travel in it.
Since he'd used a real Thanos, I don't know how that would work.
He's like,
real portals.
He goes to Josh Brolin, he's like, will you get reconstructive surgery to be big and purple?
I need to do these little lines in your chin, man.
Will you gain 7,800 pounds of muscle mass?
Jesus.
So, I was going to bring this up. I forget where I saw this. People have pointed out that Nolan actually kind of has one movie per Infinity Stone. You have This is the Space Stone, Memento's the Mind Stone, Prestige is the Soul Stone, Inception is Reality, and I think Tenet is Time. I don't know if there's one that you can point to that's Power. So maybe that's his next one.
I was struggling to remember what the stones were. I always forget one or two.
I can't remember where I saw somebody make that comparison.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, he kind of has one for each.
Power is Dark Knight Rises because of Bane.
I think somebody might have connected that there, like, because you can't, it's kind of hard to say. You could maybe connect it to Oppenheimer, but I think I saw that before Oppenheimer came out, so maybe they did point to the Dark Knight trilogy. Either way, like, it's kind of cool that he has messed with all of these concepts. And to tie it into my last point, or one of my last points for this topic, I think that's a key to science fiction, is sometimes to just stick to one or maybe like a couple of elements that you're playing with. Like, everything else stays the same in terms of like the rules that the world plays by in your movie, but you get one or two to mix up and add like a fictional twist to. I think part of why you can make that Infinity Stone comparison with Nolan is that he's kind of done that in some way. Like, it's not a one-to-one, but I think that's kind of a key thing. Like, another movie I probably want to talk about someday is Looper, which I think does a good job being grounded with its time travel rules, but then it kind of throws in like other stuff that I feel like doesn't need to be there.
A little too much. I think adding in the telekinetic elements was the big mistake.
Yeah, like it kind of works there, but I sort of wish they would have just stuck with one thing.
There's just a little too much going on. Just a little bit. Like, not too bad. It doesn't break the movie for me. I love Looper.
I struggle with it. It kind of pulls it off, but at the same time, maybe it added one too many twists there. And this movie could sort of fall prey to that. You could say that it does maybe one too many things, but Nolan has more budget. He has more runtime than somebody who's making more of a Looper level thing does. So I think he balances it out pretty well here. I think this is my last note for this, but to me, the key for a movie like this, when you're doing sci-fi, is not so much to have accurate science. It's more about creating consistent rules that your sci-fi element plays by. It doesn't always matter what those rules are. You can ground them in like certain elements of science, but you just got to play by the rules you set up. For my own experience, I wrote a script a few years ago about teleportation. I don't feel like I've found the best like emotional story to tie into that, but I like the rules I made around teleportation in that script. I think it helped keep it grounded and give it more stakes.
Let me read the script. I specialize in characters and killing them off.
I want to revisit it someday because like I really like the sci-fi world, or at least the rules that I made for that. But I mean, to kind of tie it with this topic, I think if you're going to make a good sci-fi story with good characters at the core of it, you got to find the right character conflict to attach to your sci-fi thing. And I think I didn't quite hit the mark with my teleportation script, so I want to revisit it someday.
We need to teleport back home in time for dinner.
Very low stakes.
Low stakes, but you everybody can relate to that.
Most people can. That can work too for sci-fi. I know you're not going to like this comparison, Jelani, but Everything Everywhere is not super high stakes, but it's big emotional stakes. And I think they tie those sci-fi elements very well to that. Even In Time is just, time is money, but when you're running out of time and you need to run 100 yards to give your mom or your girlfriend an extra hour so that they live, there's a pretty good comparison of, or like tying of emotional stakes and sci-fi world.
In Time is good for that reason. I think it uses its premise very well in that way. Like, everything is about the fact that time is money.
Yeah, they don't bring in another element.
Even if it's along the nose, they commit to it. Even make jokes about how, like, this is kind of ridiculous.
But that's much better than if you feel like, oh, that's not enough. Let's throw in some other BS here. Like, it's
exactly, and that's where Looper loses me a little, is because you don't want to overcomplicate it. If you overstuff it just to add more stuff in, it just makes it feel messy. If you want it to be streamlined, stick with one thing that you're good at. Like, Jumper is a movie that I enjoy. It's not a great movie, but it's also
that's what I get confused with Looper, that one, because they both end in and they're both anyway.
Well, Jumper's
the one with Hayden. Yeah, Hayden Christensen.
Yeah, with Anakin Skywalker. Yeah, exactly.
Samuel Jackson.
It also establishes its rules pretty well as far as like what you can do with the teleporting. Like, it's essentially
and Jamie
like
Bell, I think.
Jamie Bell's in it too. Yeah, and honestly, a lot of that is like they add in a little too much of like the other world building elements outside of teleportation. Like, there's a secret organization hunting them and stuff like that, and like there's just not enough time to go into all of it, right? They would have been better off with just like the idea of like running away from everything, and that being kind of what it's about.
Wanted, curved bullets, but there's an assassin. It's an assassin organization that curves bullets. Actually, they don't even really talk about curving the bullets that much.
Wanted is based on a comic that is a lot more complicated. It's like the world is full of supervillains, and that's what it's about. They simplify it, actually, in the movie. Yeah, it's very weird, but in a way I think it works. Like, them simplifying it the way that they did.
I was sold on In Time once. I saw in the trailer he was like, 4 minutes for a cup of coffee. I was like, that's funny. All right, I'll watch it.
Yeah.
I'm so excited to do In Time someday. Maybe if we do another sci-fi run, that'll be my pick. But there's a lot of other, like, very solid sci-fi and not just fun, but also kind of good sci-fi.
We got to do a time-based run. That's what we got to do. We got to do,
like,
In Time. We got to do, we'll do Tenet, but we got to do, like, In Time and Looper also.
We got to do, like, the best of the best, too. So, Angel, you can pick, like, Valerian and the City of 1,000 Planets.
No.
I'll go Jupiter Ascending.
Dude, I actually love that movie. And it's for a dumb reason. It's because I love Dane DeHaan. I love him so much.
You what?
I love Dane DeHaan so much. I think he's hilarious.
Oh, no, he's funny. He's funny.
Yeah.
I was sold on him in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. His portrayal of Harry is, bar none, one of the funniest characters in that series.
No, he's great. I actually have a newfound appreciation for that movie specifically, because I used to hate it like everybody else did, but I watch it and I realize, like, it may be one of the more entertaining Spider-Man movies. Once
he can
you know
do
it's
everything
not great,
a spider can including self-heal.
You're a fraud, Spider-Man!
You're a fraud, Spider-Man!
I don't know how, and I don't know why, but one of them bit him, and it worked.
Remember the part where he takes down 2 armed guards with his martial arts skills?
Yes.
Bang, bang.
Yes. I believe it from Dane DeHaan, though. Have you seen him in Chronicle?
I have seen him in Chronicle. Chronicle's also... That's another good one. Chronicle's also really good.
They killed a black guy in that movie, though, so I didn't care for it that much. And
That's
it was
fair.
Michael B. Jordan.
Yeah.
Oh, spoilers. Sorry, y'all. I mean, it's...
I haven't seen it, so
God.
I like how you added spoilers after it was Michael B. Jordan, as if that was the spoiler, and not that they killed the black guy.
Evan, forget you listen to this. We're probably going to do that one day. Maybe.
Okay.
I don't know. No, the guy that made it's a terrible person, though. I don't know. Max Landis.
Oh, Max Landis, yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking, though, as we're saying this, if we want to do another sci-fi run, we almost went 3 for 3 with space movies here. What if we picked, like, a more cohesive theme next time around if we do another one of these? Because I have plenty of sci-fi movies I would talk about. We could do.
I was the only non-space. Crap.
I think we've done enough AI stuff at this point to not do that.
Yeah, please no.
Yeah.
Because we did Ex Machina, which is like the gold standard. I'd like to do Her someday, but I don't think we need to throw.
Her is one I
there.
actually want to check out, so I'd be down for that too.
Her is really good, but I would do that for the next run. So our upcoming episodes, our next one's going to be Sunshine, Angel's pick for the end of our sci-fi trilogy. Our Patreon is available for $1 a month. We will be getting a new Tangents episode up there after Sunshine. I'm going to cut off the season there, and that'll be season 6. There's a lot of tangents this season because we did a lot of episodes. There's some really good ones. I haven't sent the file to you guys yet because I want to wait till it's done, but there's
I want to
some
know
fun
the
ones.
craziest one we've had, like end to end, like where we started and where we ended.
Oh, like the
What's
how did we get?
farthest?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
From lotion, wondering how lotion tastes to you getting washcloths.
That was one we had. There might be a couple to rival it for this batch. Whatever the one from Godzilla -1 where we talked about anime for a while.
We talked
That
about
might have a
anime
big-
for like a good hour.
I think it might have been 40 minutes.
Oh, were we talking about like the forms of Goku and everything?
That was
Yeah, I think it was that. We'll see it when the tangent episode comes out, as will
Yeah.
all of you viewers.
Yeah, that's our longest one. But that'll be coming up soon. We have other stuff on the Patreon in the meantime, other Tangents episodes, watch-alongs, things of that nature. We have our YouTube channel with video essays if you're not already there. We have our Discord, and you can join that for free. If you're listening to this on Spotify, leave a rating and review, or if you're I don't know if other platforms let you do that, but if they do, go ahead and do that. If you're on YouTube, do all the like, share, subscribe things. And you can follow us on Instagram and Blue Sky at INT Analysis Pod. I am on Instagram, Blue Sky, and Letterboxd at ev_Wes. And where are you guys at?
I'm on Instagram, Jelani T. Kelly. Actors Access if you want to cast me.
I am on Instagram at AngelsArc15. I am also now on Blue Sky at AngelsArc15, although I have posted nothing, so expect nothing. And then I'm also on Letterboxd at Serenity Cinema.
So thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Wow.
Blah.